The notification pinged at 11:47 p.m., and Sarah's heart stopped when she saw the message preview on her screen. The text she'd meant to send to her best friend, complete with inappropriate emojis and a joke about her ridiculously handsome boss with the perfectly sculpted jawline, had gone to Marcus Hale instead. Marcus Hale, the Marcus Hale, billionaire CEO of Hale Industries, the man who signed her paychecks and whose mere presence in the office could make her forget how to operate a coffee machine. Sarah collapsed onto her worn couch, her 6-year-old daughter Emma's stuffed animals tumbling to the floor. This wasn't just embarrassing. This was career-ending. Single mothers working as executive, assistants to tech billionaires, didn't get second chances after sexually harassing their bosses via text message at midnight. She imagined the HR meeting, the awkward box packing, trying to explain to Emma why mommy couldn't afford her art classes anymore. Her phone buzzed. Sarah squeezed her eyes shut, unable to look. It buzzed again. Then the doorbell rang. Sarah's eyes flew open. It was nearly midnight on a Tuesday. Emma was asleep down the hall in their cramped 2-bedroom apartment in Queens. Nobody rang the doorbell at this hour unless something was terribly wrong. She crept to the door, checking the peephole. Marcus Hale stood in her hallway, still wearing his tailored suit from the office, his dark hair slightly disheveled as if he'd run, his hands through it during the drive over. This couldn't be happening. This wasn't happening. Sarah opened the door a crack, her cheeks burning with humiliation. "Mr. Hale, I am so sorry. That text was meant for my friend. It was completely inappropriate and unprofessional. And I understand if you need to fire me, but could we please do this in the morning? My daughter is sleeping and you mentioned you were out of groceries." His voice was quieter than she'd ever heard it in the boardroom. In the text thread. Before the other message, Sarah blinked. She had mentioned that hours earlier, in a completely separate conversation she'd been having with her friend about struggling to make ends meet before payday. She hadn't realized both conversations were happening in such quick succession when she'd sent the mortifying text to the wrong person. "I don't understand why you're here," she whispered. Marcus held up his phone, showing her message thread. "You wrote that you'd been watering down Emma's juice boxes because you couldn't afford groceries until Friday, that your landlord raised the rent again, that you were tired of choosing between paying for her art classes or fixing your car." He paused. The Flirty text came in right after that. I figured the second message was a mistake, but the first ones weren't. Sarah's throat tightened. She'd been venting to her friend, never imagining her boss would see her private struggles laid bare. "Mr. Hale, my personal problems aren't your concern. I shouldn't have been texting about personal matters on my work phone. How long has it been this hard?" The gentleness in his question nearly broke her. Sarah gripped the doorframe, fighting back tears. "Since my ex-husband left 3 years ago, since I discovered he'd drained our savings account and stuck me with credit card debt I didn't know existed, since I became the only thing standing between my daughter and complete instability," she laughed bitterly. "But I'm managing. We're managing. By watering down juice boxes? People survive on less." Marcus ran his hand through his hair again, and Sarah noticed the exhaustion in his eyes. This wasn't the commanding CEO she saw in meetings. This was someone who looked almost vulnerable. "My mother watered down juice boxes," he said quietly. "After my father left, she worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat. I wore the same pair of shoes for 2 years. Even after my toes poked through the front, she never complained, never asked for help, just kept pushing forward." He met Sarah's eyes. "I watched her sacrifice everything, and I was too young to do anything about it. I'm not too young anymore. I don't want your pity." "Good, because that's not what this is." He pulled out his phone again. "Your rent is $2,200 a month, correct? I saw the envelope on your desk last week when you were rushing to seal it before the late fee kicked in." Sarah's cheeks flushed deeper. Nothing was private anymore. "I'm buying the building," Marcus continued matter-of-factly. "I've already contacted the owner. He's been looking to sell for months. I'm offering 20% above asking price for a quick close. You'll pay $800 a month going forward. So will every other tenant. The building needs updates anyway. Proper heating, better security, that broken elevator that traps people between floors." "You can't just buy my building," Actually, I can. I'll have it by the end of the week. He scrolled through his phone. I'm also restructuring your compensation. You've been doing the work of 3 people for the salary of 1. Your new annual salary is $180,000, effective immediately, plus benefits that actually cover Emma's health care without bankrupting you. Sarah's legs felt weak. That was more than triple what she currently made. Mr. Hale, there's a fund I've been establishing for single parents at Hale Industries, he continued, as if discussing quarterly projections. Education stipends, child care assistance, emergency grants. You're not the only one drowning while pretending to swim. Your situation made me realize how many people I employ are 1 car breakdown away from disaster. That ends now. Why? The word came out as barely a whisper. Why are you doing this? Marcus's expression softened, and for the first time since she'd started working for him 18 months ago, Sarah saw past the billionaire CEO to the person underneath. Because when I was 8 years old, I watched my mother cry herself to sleep after her car broke down and she couldn't afford to fix it. I watched her choose between paying the electric bill or buying me new shoes. I watched her age 10 years in 2, sacrificing everything so I could have a chance at something better. His voice grew thick. I built this company so I'd never feel that powerless again. So I could be the person who showed up when it mattered. Your text wasn't a mistake, Sarah. It was a wake-up call. Tears slipped down Sarah's cheeks. I don't know what to say. Say you'll stop apologizing for that other text. It was actually pretty funny. Sarah laughed through her tears, a sound somewhere between relief and disbelief. It was mortifying. It was honest. Marcus smiled, and it transformed his entire face. For what it's worth, I'm flattered, though my jawline is really more adequately sculpted than perfectly sculpted. Oh my God! Sarah covered her face with her hands. I should let you sleep, Marcus said, stepping back. But Sarah? Stop trying to be superhuman. You've been carrying everything alone for too long. Let people help. Let me help. After he left, Sarah stood in her doorway for a long moment, processing what had just happened. A terrible mistake had somehow transformed into a miracle. But more than that, she'd been seen. Really seen, not as an employee or a single mother struggling to survive, but as a person deserving of dignity and support. The next morning, Emma bounced into the kitchen in her unicorn pajamas, asking what they'd have for breakfast. Sarah looked at their nearly empty refrigerator, then at her phone, where a notification showed a deposit that would change everything. Whatever you want, sweetheart, Sarah said, pulling her daughter into a hug. From now on, whatever you want. 3 months later, Sarah watched Emma twirl through their renovated apartment, showing Marcus the painting she'd made in her art class. She hadn't had to quit after all. The building had been transformed. New paint, working appliances, a playground in the courtyard where children's laughter echoed every afternoon. Marcus had kept his word about everything. The salary increase, the building purchase, the single-parent fund that was now helping 43 families across the company. But more than that, he'd shown up, not as her boss, but as someone who understood. That kindness wasn't about grand gestures. It was about seeing people's struggles and refusing to look away. Pretty good painting, Marcus said, kneeling to Emma's level as she showed him the sunset she'd created. Mommy says you're the reason I can go to art class again, Emma said with 6-year-old directness. Thank you for being nice to my mom. Marcus glanced at Sarah, something warm and unguarded in his expression. Your mom makes it easy. Later, after Emma had gone to bed, Sarah and Marcus sat on her couch, the same worn couch where she'd collapsed in horror that night. 3 months ago, everything had changed since then, including the way she saw the man beside her. I've been thinking about that text, Marcus said suddenly. Sarah groaned. Please don't remind me about how sometimes the worst mistakes lead to the most important moments. He turned to face her. You were invisible to me before that night, Sarah. Not because I didn't value your work, but because I'd forgotten to see the people behind the productivity. You reminded me that humanity isn't a weakness, it's everything. Sarah's heart stuttered. Marcus, I'm not your boss right now, he said quietly. Right now, I'm just someone who can't stop thinking about a woman brave enough to raise a child alone, strong enough to survive impossible circumstances, and honest enough to send accidentally flirty texts at midnight. He smiled. Think you might have room for one more in whatever you're building here? Sarah looked around her transformed apartment, at the life that had bloomed from ashes, at the man who'd shown up when she'd needed someone most. Sometimes salvation arrived in unexpected ways. Sometimes it came disguised as a humiliating mistake that forced truth into the light. Yeah, she whispered, reaching for his hand. I think I might. Outside, the city hummed with millions of stories. Some tragic, some triumphant, most somewhere in between. But in that small Queen's apartment, where juice boxes were no longer watered down and tomorrow no longer felt like an enemy to survive, two people who'd both known. Struggle found something neither had been looking for: hope, wrapped in the simple courage to be human together.